And we are live. I'm joined here today with Analytical Chick and Bold Like a Leopard, and Maddodge Productions may be joining us a little bit later. We're starting out the day talking about Louis Farrakhan, and then we're going to move into the main topic, which is punishment versus rehabilitation in the legal system. So I was thinking, Bold, you've been really looking into Louis Farrakhan, and you've been exposing some of the dirt on him. Why don't you start off by giving us a little background information on the man?
Okay, yeah, I'm Bold Like a Leopard. I do a lot of digging into topics like this, and like I've said on every video, I'm a freedom of speech. I don't know if I'd call it an absolutist, but almost absolutist. So I'm not trying to. Please don't construe this as saying that I'm against Farrakhan's right to say things that are hateful. But if you look at his record over the decades since the 1950s, so that's about 50, 60 years now. I think he started out in 1957. Yeah, about 60 years working with Malcolm X at the time, with the Nation of Islam. So a lot of people are making this out to be an issue only of anti-Semitism, only of his bigotry towards Jews. But if you look through his entire record, you see somebody who is very retrograde in his opinions towards women. I mean, like beyond misogyny. It's like stuff that, you know, I can go through it here if you want, but
yes.
Yeah, you guys want me to just show the article?
Like people, you know, certain M-word people, I know they tend not to like women, but it doesn't surprise me because blacks actually tend to be a little bit more sexist than regular Americans, except for like black feminist women. But black men tend to be more, you know, that way. And then, you know, when you add in the M word and you put them together, I tried to watch some Farrakhan videos, like actually him, and I found him really hard to watch because he talks so slow.
Well, as it is, me being a supposedly white male, I at least am able to get some entertainment out of it because he says some very amusing things about the fairer sex, if we're still allowed to say that. For example, may I present Jimso?
Yep.
Okay, so here is, I hope you guys can see it. So I made like a few comparisons of things that he said and to, you know, people who are considered not tolerant in the popular culture. So I said Farrakhan is so sexist, he made Howard Stern look like Justin Trudeau. So there's a clip, and I have links here. You can go to the clips, and he rebuked men in the 1980s for allowing women to be the breadwinner in the household. So that might seem a bit mild. There's another one where he yells at women who can't cook as being lazy and unfit to be mothers and wives. And he repeats he repeats the same thing almost word for word in 2013. He also says that eating fast food affects the female's eggs and the male's sperm. So no Hardee's for you, any of you, especially you, Analytical. I know you have a problem. Just kidding. We both know you don't eat fast food because of dietary restrictions. But going on, he of course said that homosexuality is unnatural. He said that on a number of occasions. He condemned Barack Obama for endorsing gay marriage in 2012, and he said that he used Sodom and Gomorrah, which is actually it's a biblical reference. It's not as prominent in the Quran as it is in the Old Testament.
That's one thing I noticed when I did try to watch some of his videos. One of the things that I noticed was that he talks about Jesus a lot, which struck me as strange because he's a, you know, M word.
Okay, so let me explain here. I'll say this. The organization he heads is called the Nation of Islam.
Right, it's the black Muslims.
Right, but the Nation of Islam's theology is very, very, very different from orthodox streams of Islam, you know, the Sunnis, the Shiites, and everything. It's more based on a number of teachings that were promulgated by Wallace Fard, who was he was an immigrant of you know, dubious origin in 1920s Detroit, and his follower Elijah Muhammad, who is considered the actual founder of the Nation of Islam. And a lot of their teachings are more based on race and on biblical scripture. Excuse me, I have a cough. But he's basically, Elijah Muhammad was of the mind that the religion of Christianity had helped enslave the Black Americans and the slaves throughout the world, Black people throughout the world. And he believed that Islam, or Moorish science, as it was called before him, because there were other types of this type of Islam before him, led by Noble Drew Ali. You know, I'm not going to try to go through the whole history, but this had been around from way before Louis Farrakhan and Malcolm X. So essentially, they concocted this new religion that has some elements of Islam. They do read the Quran, and they do use it for a number of sermons and things like that. But a lot of their theology is not based on the Quran, and he's had a number of feuds with you know, traditional Muslim clerics. So that's a huge difference in terms of theology between him and you know, most typical sects of Islam.
Well, one thing, like going back to what you were saying about the it wasn't really based on the actual teachings. I did notice that because AC, you pointed out the fact he made reference to Jesus. I also noticed that he kept making reference to God instead of Allah during his speeches, whatever he happened to be talking about. It was quite surprising.
Low, drawn out speech that's similar to a Black preacher.
He's definitely a showman from what you can tell from the way that he was presenting his ideas, but he was presenting them, no shame whatsoever with the stuff he was saying, whether that happened to be about the Jews or happened to be about women, white people, whatever it happened to be. There was just no shame coming from this man. And so you were saying, oh, go ahead.
Are you talking to me or AC?
Oh, I thought I heard somebody was about to jump in. Never mind. So yeah, recently, well, like the reason you got jumped on this, Bold, was because modern Democrats and the feminist movement, well, more specifically the Women's March movement, have allied themselves with this person. And this isn't the first time that we've seen either party ally themselves with someone who ends up being less than
not true to the progressive message. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And that's really why I have been on this pattern of talking about this. And I haven't given up on other topics, of course. You know, some people have said, well, what's the big deal here? Well, the problem is that they're focusing on the anti-Semitic aspect of Louis Farrakhan, but there's no contradiction, if you guys will forgive me, between being, you know, hating Jews and being a feminist, okay? If, you know, I don't think that there's a contradiction there directly. You guys may disagree. But if you're advocating things like saying that fast food affects the female's egg, and, you know, maybe he has some evidence of it. You know, I watch a number of funny channels as well that I don't, you know, I always give them the benefit of a doubt and look if they have any sources. He calls women lazy for not cooking for their husband and children, says they're unfit to be mothers if they do so. But he, and there's also another clip in one of my videos where he makes fun of women on BET. He says that if they're wearing a thong, there's no way he can keep praying and stuff like that. So, you know, again, this is not about me attacking Louis Farrakhan's right to free speech. I had a stream on with one of his listeners. I don't know if he's a total follower. And you know, we had a very cordial conversation, very, very cordial, good gentleman named Tariq from Texas. I have no problem with people wanting to believe in a religion, even if I disagree with the religion's tenets. But we're talking about the Women's March, which is a very progressive feminist, what do you get to call it? The intersectional feminist movement, correct?
Right.
And their whole bag is how you have to fight on multiple fronts against bigotry. And this guy, He's racist against Mexicans. He's racist against white people, Italians. Sorry for all the Italians I mispronounced the name, but he shoots in all directions, and you know what? Give him credit. You know, he's not somebody. He fights with Arab leaders. He called some of them. I have here a clip where he yells, "Who do you think brought the Quran to us?" You know, he was saying, you know, they didn't bring them the Quran, and in fact, he acknowledges that there was an Arab slave trade. Then he called them a group of the F word, meaning the slur for a homosexual man. So this is talking about Arab people.
Flag.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I was waiting for somebody else to say it so they would get flagged and not me. But I'm just saying that he's allowed to be on YouTube. A lot of his speeches have not been flagged because they're under, you know, mirror channels. One of them I think is called the Savior's Helper. You know, and I think it's a valuable resource because I can do research. I'm against censoring this type of stuff, even if it's stuff I disagree with, because I can do research. I can cross-check stuff. It is entertaining. I don't care what you guys say. I find it entertaining. But
so slow. I cannot watch him.
Sorry, I just happen to. I guess it's a taste issue. Like, people have different tastes, and I think that Farrakhan has that type of charismatic preacher speaking ability, and I understand if people want to go to his temples. I think they do call them mosques still, but I remember that at a certain point the Nation of Islam called their houses of worship temples. So we're talking about why is this such a big deal? Because one of the board members of the Women's March, Tamika Mallory, is a Farrakhan supporter. She claims that she went to meetings of Farrakhan's organization on, you know, upwards of 30 years. You also have associates of his in Congress who have said that, you know, there's like Danny Davis, the congressman for Chicago. Those people are all Democrats. They're supposedly against bigotry. If they're not against bigotry, they can, you know, change their mind anytime. Let the public know that they're for everything that Farrakhan says. I'm, you know, or they can say publicly, you know, we don't want somebody around who calls the leaders of Arab nations pansies, basically. So I think that it's a consistency issue. There's also issues of the Nation of Islam, and that's in the article too. They were involved in the murders of various people. Before Farrakhan was the leader under Elijah Muhammad, there were a number of NOI members that were involved in the murder of Malcolm X, including the confessed killer. A number of them were involved in a mass murder in 1974 against another Muslim sect, fronted by a guy named Ernest 2X McGee, or I think his later Muslim name was Hamas Abdul Khalis. So they murdered 7 people, 5 of them children, 4 of them drowned in a bathtub. So those were NOI members. So look,
oh, lovely.
I'm not saying you can't believe what you want to believe or say what you want to say. We're talking about consistency
That
here.
murder is like the way to do things, then, you know, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, the issue is that it's never been directly connected to Louis Farrakhan. So he's never been convicted of anything. He's entitled to, you know, on my channel, I'm not a lawyer, but I do say that due process and you know, the presumption of innocence are very important. But he's often said that Malcolm X deserved to die because he was a traitor to Elijah Muhammad. He said a number of things like that. He said a number of things that indicate that he was involved in some of the bloody episodes of the Nation of Islam in the 60s and 70s. So, I mean, my article is up. You guys are free to ask anything you want, or, you know, I think that the evidence is all on the public record. It's either on video, him saying it, or it's been in publications like the Chicago Tribune and PBS. I think Meet the Press on NBC. I have a video from there. It's not as if he's hidden his views. It's you know, he's a very frank person about certain topics, and you can see that from the videos.
Right.
One thing you mentioned is about how the wording that he's used when he's talked about the Malcolm X situation. One thing that I did find out is that even if he's not admitting any sort of connection to the assassins themselves with Malcolm X, he did, at least I think it was an interview in 2000, he stated that he believes that some of his rhetoric, the way he spoke about Malcolm X, may have actually led some people to carry out the assassination. So even if he's not claiming direct connection, he is claiming at least a hand at least inside of this assassination attempt. And well, at least I was just going to say, it seems that these days the Democratic Party, along with many left-wing parties around the world, liberal parties, labor parties, and from various countries, have teamed up with Islam. I don't know why, but maybe after that's something we want to hit up at right after.
Well, I think that this is a little more of a niche issue. It's not quite the same as Islam, like we were talking about earlier. The issue is that there are certain communities in the U.S., Indianapolis, for example, where they have a congressman named Andre Carson, who himself, I think he's Muslim, but he's not a member of the NOI. And Farrakhan's following has they're a good chunk of the constituency when it comes to primaries and things like that. So these congressmen, they need NOI members sometimes as voters in the primaries, or they need them as organizers. They're very good. And by the way, the NOI is a very organized organization. Their members are largely, I believe, satisfied with its services. They do philanthropical work for communities that they work in. I'm trying to be fair here to everybody involved, except for the Women's March, because there's no explanation for the Women's March to be involved in this.
The only thing I could even say that maybe where the Women's March falls into this was just making reference to, I guess, the video that I dropped earlier this week talking about Marxism and postmodernism. Just the fact that this sort of ideology is seeped in through the gender studies, it most likely seeped into the feminist movement and the Women's March through this means. Well, the Women's March was just, so we look at the people who are connected to it. I mean, Linda Sarsour, the things that she said and done in the past have been bad enough. I mean, one thing I remember that one of the worst things, she said one of the worst things I ever heard, which was, I don't know if you guys know Ayaan Hirsi Ali, which is just.
Yeah, the thing about the genitals.
Yeah.
And Brigitte Gabriel. She said it about both of them.
Oh, did she? Well, for anybody watching that didn't know, Linda Sarsour, these are two women that have had female genital mutilation committed against them when they were children. And Linda Sarsour, because they didn't support her in the Women's March, full out said that they didn't deserve their vaginas. So the people who are associated with this march and in a lot of the feminist movements these days are not exactly stand-up people of the community.
Yeah, I think that one of the flaws in the Women's March is that you have a lot of weak white liberals in it. And they're people who are so insecure that they don't know how to react when they see this complete lack of standards among their own movement. And, I covered in the stream with Maddodge earlier, who's in the chat, by the way, but there was a lady who's one of the, I think we can still use the term lady. Is that correct, guys? Is that sexist? But,
probably, but we'll use it anyway.
There's this fine damsel. I will show her picture if you'll permit me. Her name is Alyssa Klein, and I hope you guys can see it. But she has decided to leave the Women's March, and finally, somebody said, this is bullshit. I think I'll go back to, doing my own progressive phony baloney crap by myself or something. And she's left, and that's the first person on the national level who's left the Women's March. I've seen other people, including a male feminist who has, a Jewish male feminist who went on CNN, and it was in one of my videos. I don't know if you guys saw it. And he debated Sally Kohn on it, and he was very weak about it. He was saying he still believes in the Women's March and et cetera. And I've just been watching his Twitter feed, and after all of the attacks against him for calling out Tamika Mallory, he basically started attacking the Republican Jewish Coalition, who, I'm not a Republican, but You know, he decided to deflect and look at the right wing and say, well, you're supporting white nationalism, you know? And I think that at a certain point, you have to realize that you have to regain your own independent voice. That's why I don't join parties. I don't join, I don't join organizations that I think might pigeonhole me into positions that I don't support. That's why I've repeatedly written and commented on the Anti-Defamation League, or the Aiding and Abetting Defamation League, which I talk about all the time.
You said that
think,
one time on one of ABL's streams, and he like laughed, he chuckled when you said that.
Well, I think you know, ABL. It's the same parallel in the black community. I think a lot of them they're done listening to the NAACP. There's probably some Muslims that are tired of listening to CARE. They're like, I want to run my business or go to my place of business.
I don't think you have the same results with CARE, but I know you're absolutely right about the NAACP. I recently was looking to see where they jive with Christianity because of the whole stuff with Candocs. And what I found was a few years back, they got fed up with the many Christians got fed up with the NAACP because of their support for gay marriage.
Yeah, and I've had you know, I've had debates with a Christian member of the NAACP in Tennessee who's frequently on my stream, and he always points to the fact that they were pivotal in the civil rights movement, and that he just wants to fulfill their vision from back then. Well, I said to him, you know, they support Planned Parenthood now. You're an evangelical Christian. They're opposed to the right to bear arms. They've also, I gave him probably 15 different statements from the NAACP, and he said, well, the national organization doesn't really represent me. But it's like, look.
Yeah, they're full on leftist at this point.
Yeah, the point is, what I like about, you know, let's say hypothetically, Adrian has a topic on his stream where I disagree with him. I'll write something back to him, or I'll say something on his stream, and that's the benefit of having independent creators, or something on your stream, Analytical, that I disagree with. So we all reserve our right to our own opinions here. But when we pick up membership cards or carry signs or whatever, remember there was that hilarious, I thought it was hilarious, you guys might think it wasn't, there was the Dyke March in Chicago last year. 2 Jewish women kicked out for having the Star of David on a gay flag. I thought it was very humorous that they were at a march that was explicitly without a permit. They were proud of it. They wanted to confront the police over Dyke affairs or something. What exactly they were trying to accomplish remains a mystery. But they were complaining about being kicked out of a march that was explicitly without a permit. And for that, I can only just clap and laugh and eat some popcorn. And that's why I don't give any sympathy for members of this progressive bloc. I say I'll stand here, express my opinions. You know, I'll support people if I agree with them, and I'll you know, oppose them if I don't. And I hope that they don't take it personally.
Well, one thing I just wanted to quickly say too is, despite everything with the ACL and the Southern Poverty Law Center, despite all that, they still put the Islamic group, what were they called again? The Nation of Islam. They're still on their list of hate groups and watch groups. You've got to do some pretty bad stuff if you're going to make it on that list, for like if you're a Muslim group or something. For considering how these lists have turned into just...
I think the right put a huge amount of pressure on them to get them on that list.
Well, the Nation of Islam has been on those lists.
There, you target us. See, why don't you have them on?
The Nation of Islam has been on those lists for decades, and that's because they were always against liberalism, as you know, traditional liberalism. And I'll show you the photo from the headline photo from my story. If you can see that, this is George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder of the American Nazi Party.
Make it bigger or no?
I don't know. Let me see.
I think that's just the way it goes, right? Oh, yeah.
So this guy was the founder of the American Nazi Party, and he was, he was. I wouldn't say he was best friends, but there was collaboration between him and Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam in the 1960s. The Nation of Islam is a black separatist organization. Again, for the 50th time, there are some Nation of Islam people that say, well, I thought you believe in freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of speech. The Women's March doesn't, and neither does the ADL or SPLC. So you have a black separatist movement and a white separatist movement, the American Nazi Party, and they were buddy-buddy. So of course they were on the ADL list, I think as far back as the mid-1970s. And the SPLC, I'm not sure when I think they started around that time. So
I think also these groups probably got a good reputation because they used to be impartial. But I mean, both of these groups are like the ADL, the ACLU, and the Shitty Poverty Law Center. They're all like hardcore leftists now. Like they don't want to put anything, on. They don't want to call out any group that's hateful that's on the left. They have to undergo tremendous pressure to essentially admit that,
well, the left-wing group is hateful, or that the left-wing group deserves to be on the list, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the issue with all of these groups, which I call them the alphabet soup of progressivism, is that they traditionally, a lot of them were involved in important, legal battles concerning, for example, the ACLU concerning freedom of speech and anti-censorship back in the 60s and 70s. The ADL was involved in the civil rights movement. The NAACP, obviously, the Southern Poverty Law Center helped combat hate groups throughout the Deep South for a while. I think throughout the 80s. And unfortunately, what developed was some mission creep. So as progressivism drifted further to the left, and these groups, their nonprofit status afforded them the ability to raise a lot of money, then it became profitable to have these groups around, and they'd have these galas. There's the GLAAD Awards, right? Adam Carolla makes fun of it. It's hilarious. The GLAAD Awards, like the least fun organization in the fucking world. They call themselves GLAAD, and they just won't stop, because once once gay marriage was legalized by the court, by the way, not by the popular vote. They're so crazy about the popular vote. Almost in every case, gay marriage failed in popular ballot measures in the states, including California, by a 55-45 split. So once that was accomplished, what do they have to go? Then they have to, it's like, what's the next world to conquer? Well, they start doing this whole hormone thing with the kids.
Well,
and,
what did I say last night on the other stream you and I were on, or this morning, or whatever it was? The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. Mm-hmm. And this is a quote from a commie from the 60s.
Like, you mean what you just said? Or
that's a quote from a commie from the 60s. They admitted it. They said, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. All of this stuff, it's not really that issue. It's that they want to overthrow the government.
I can believe that for sure. I mean, the whole image of equality that's been put forward by the left is just always been a means to the end for the most part. Now, I actually think a majority of the people who take on left-wing ideology, I think they actually believe in that thing. They believe that they're fighting for equality, most of them. However, I think that more of the people in positions of authority, such as professors or people in areas such as the leaders of the ADL or
absolutely.
Yeah, they're doing it for malicious intentions.
The people doing the grunt work don't really realize that they're being used as pawns.
Yeah, like people like Antifa, I believe that they believe they're just brainwashed into believing heavily into this indoctrination, and then they're just exactly the pawns carrying out the work. What do you think, Bolt? You think we're getting too conspiratorial?
No, there's clearly I don't know if it's as organized as you're talking about, but a good example is last week, John Greenblatt, who is the head of the ADL, came out with a statement on Now This, which is one of those like idiotic Facebook media.
Leftists.
Yeah, he said that the word globalist is in and of itself anti-Semitic. That's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. I don't remember ever being called a globalist in my life. I've been called lots of other things, but not globalist. And this is a guy who I've written. By the way, on my on Hard News Network, which is where that other article is. You can find one of my other articles, and it goes through the ADL and how it became. The ADL was never great. At certain points, it was good for giving people at least like a voice to advocate for against bigotry and discrimination when there were quotas at Harvard and things like that for Jews, and there was the Leo Frank case, which that they really did they conflated everything eventually with issues of race and other things that have nothing to do with Judaism or Jews. And I go through the whole thing. The previous head of the ADL, whose name was Abe Foxman, was also not as bad as John Greenblatt, but he was clearly against freedom of speech, and he was always trying. For example, there was the Skokie case in the 1970s where a bunch of Nazis wanted to march in Chicago. Now, I don't know how to say this any clearer. I don't want Nazis to march anywhere, but the Supreme Court has ruled over and over again that they can, as long as they don't harm people or harass them or explicitly threaten anyone. And they lost the case because they don't have a case. I don't know the way it works it worked in Canada in the 70s, but there were Nazi movements in the U.S. for years and years. Did them being able to march in Skokie lead to a revival of neo-Nazism in America? I don't think so. I mean, I'd like to see the evidence of that. So that's basically how they've been doing things. They've been pretending that let's say that this is a problem, okay, that they're marching in Skokie. Well, what's the solution? The solution is not to go to the court and force them not to march. The solution is to offer your vision of a freer America, your vision of a society where people can be at liberty to do as they please. And that's contrary to National Socialism. That's really the way I think that people should fight against bigotries, not by thinking that you need speech codes, because eventually you're going to be under that speech code too, and you can see that in the Women's March.
That's always been one of the reasons that I've actually supported freedom of speech and also freedom of religion. It's just the fact that right now it's not about when you're the majority, it's about when you're the minority, when you're the one that everyone hates. It's that protection. Now, I know a lot of people would think that's like just those words on a document is stupid, but one reason I've always supported them is to do with it's better to have them in place than to not have them at all, even if those words are just on paper. For instance, I know that one of my favorite comedians is George Carlin, and now while one thing that George Carlin does say is that he says that you don't have rights. You have a list of temporary privileges. When you need them the most, they're taken away. And even if that is the truth, I would still rather have those rights in place, because they still, in some ways, even if it is just for the courts, a form of protection for the average citizen. But the left just wants to tear those down completely. And the only reason I could see that is because as they're gaining more steam, they tend to use these sort of freedoms in order to preach their ideologies. And then when they start taking over, that's when they want to take away these freedoms so that there's no dissenting opinion.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, do you want to move on to our main topic of the night, which was punishment versus rehabilitation?
Punishment.
Punishment,
okay,
you're pure punishment?
Okay, we're done.
Well, Well, anyway, one reason I wanted to bring this up was actually because not too long ago I took a political, like one of those political tests, you know, but it was a little more in depth. So when it came down to the question of punishment versus rehabilitation, I seemed to fall about a 50-50 mark. I was about 52% punishment and about 48% rehabilitation. So I've always said before that I approve of, for big crimes, harsh crimes, I definitely approve of harsh punishments. When it comes to some of the smaller crimes, I do believe that maybe rehabilitation is the better way to go. I think for most drug users, not the dealers, but the users themselves, I believe rehabilitation is actually the better path than going through the punishment system. It seems these days when we put these people in prison, they're just coming out, they're going back to their drugs anyway, and they just become violent criminals learning violent means in order to score their drugs now. But you just say all punishment, AC? Why?
I mean, not for like light crimes, but like I'm a fan of punishment. I don't think that we enforce our laws strongly enough. I'd like to see, like, if somebody rapes and murders, I definitely think they should get the death penalty. So,
and that, yeah, I don't know, depending on the seriousness of the crime. I've said before that I do support the death penalty in extreme situations. I don't know exactly. I would say that for one murder, I don't know if I necessarily support the death penalty for that. Once you're starting to get in two or more, then definitely, because, you know,
yeah,
you've
like
impacted
serial
multiple
killers. But also if it's like rape and murder,
I've actually
support it then too.
Well, I've actually said before that when it comes to rape, I want harsher punishments on both sides. For the people who commit the rape, absolutely. I want them to get the full extent of the law. I want them to be thrown in prison, gladly 20, 25 years, no problems. I will throw a rapist in prison for that long. At the same time, I think there should be harsher crimes whenever there's false crimes that go on.
I would agree with that too. I mean, I would never falsely accuse.
Well, it's just it seems these days that those sort of crimes and stuff that, like, sorry, those crimes, those sort of, a lot of people are starting to claim some rape charges, like
Yeah,
we've seen from the Me
the
Too
mattress
movement.
girl was proved to be a liar, right?
Yeah, from what I understand about that story, what ended up happening with her was she ended up having sex with the dude, and then like a day or two later, she started regretting some of the things that they did, and then she went off and said
Don't
that she
teach morals to our teenagers anymore.
Yeah, I heard a lot
ahead.
about the mattress girl too, and that was one of the episodes that got me back to, well, not that one, but the UVA. Are you guys familiar with the UVA scandal?
Yeah.
So those got me back into writing, by the way, on social topics, because and the mattress girl, might as well let's talk about that one first. I believe also one of the motives was that the guy whose name was I know his last name was Nungeser, was a German exchange student. So this guy had wanted casual sex and not a relationship, and she wanted a relationship, and you know, I guess he didn't want to.
Sweetheart.
What's that?
I said, then close your knees, sweetheart.
Well, she was known as a rather promiscuous lassie, so that he didn't want to have a long-term relationship with her, and she took it out on him by spreading rumors that he was a rapist, and she made his life miserable for the rest of his time at Columbia. And he eventually sued the school and won because they wouldn't do anything.
Well, that's part of that Title IX that Obama put in place on school campuses, right? The one where any sort of accusation and you're immediately thrown off, no investigation or something like that. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Well, the Title IX issue is related to that. I think in this case, they did investigate him, and he did lawyer up, and he beat the charge. And Columbia let him remain at the school, so you know, credit to him for not caving in. And then so that's when the harassment began. They started doing the whole mattress girl thing. What was the mattress girl, if you guys remember? she was carrying her mattress around, and then she had this whole coven of other, angry women who would go around with their mattresses and harass him at his classes. And basically, the school refused to do anything. So, that's basically how the whole thing developed. Because, yes, under Title IX, he had to be investigated and basically subjected to this policing. And eventually, he was cleared by, I think an investigation either by the school or by police. And then, as retributions, he started the whole mattress girl thing. And then the press joined in, and they made her into some sort of feminist symbol.
They always seem to just get the worst people to be their spokesperson. But I actually remember hearing a couple stories too recently. Sorry, I was just looking something up from something I saw in the chat. Somebody asked for the political test that I was talking about earlier. I'm just trying to find it. Anyway, one that really got to me, which happened in my home city, was that one of my old jobs, I used to work at a coffee shop, and I got to know a guy there, just a customer who came in. He's older than I am. He was about 20 years older, but we got to know each other, sort of became friends a little bit. And anyway, he plays Santa at the malls during Christmas time. And he told me about one situation in particular where there was a guy who was well known. He played a lot of the Santa Clauses around the around town. And then one day he got accused of sexual assault by one of the elves. So he ended up actually got to the point where he went to trial over it. And when it came down to cross-examination, she broke on the stand on her cross-examination, and she said that she ended up making it up. I can't remember right now what he said the reason was that she did it, but anyway, so she broke right in front of everyone, told everyone and the judge that it didn't actually happen. But yet, despite that, this guy's reputation was completely destroyed. He couldn't get a job working for mall Santas anymore just because everybody had heard about what had happened to him. It completely destroyed the reputations of these guys, which is one of the reasons I've said that I want to see more harsher punishments from both sides, because you can't be just allowed to tear somebody's career down, especially how easy it is these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
They always say, like, oh, as a woman, in theory, but I can't stand by women like that. Women like that make women look bad, so.
Absolutely. I mean, just that's why there's so many groups such as the MGTOW or the MRA movement. It's really just a reaction to these extreme feminist movements that are out there.
Right.
Okay, but I'm curious from both of you, when do you support the death penalty?
Serial killings, rapes and murders. I mean, now it is, I think, on the books for serial killers, but even in the states that have it, generally, they still don't death penalty somebody unless, they kill, quite a few people. Usually it's a, sort of infamous, Ted Bundy type or whatever. And I think anybody with a few murders under their belt and a rap sheet, from here to next year, I think anybody with a really long rap sheet should probably just, I mean, most people, if they're in life in prison, it's just save the government and the taxpayers the money, and just, they're not gonna become productive citizens. Just do everyone a favor and get rid of them.
Paul, do you support the death penalty, or are you against it?
My basic, the death penalty is something where I'm a little agnostic on. I think that, there's certain areas where I don't oppose it, like what Analytical was talking about. I would say that my suggestion is this is a topic that is best left to the discretion of local and state authorities, or in your case, provincial authorities. And if let's say in a state like Vermont, where there's strong objection to the death penalty, I have no problem with them not having the death penalty. The one of the problems is that if hypothetically it could give people the impetus to commit a grave crime in their jurisdiction because of the lack of the death penalty. But I'd have to see a study that proves it either way. So, I mean, that's the best answer I could give.
Okay, fair enough. One thing that I actually, well, I guess I'll give my my idea on the death penalty. Just 1 second. All right. So anyway, when we're talking about the death penalty, I think it has to be. We need to take it in special situations for the most part, because we have seen in the past how there's been many people who have been put on death row, even executed, and it turns out that they're innocent. This is why I would say for the extreme crimes, I would be more supportive of it, because there's usually more evidence, such as serial killers. Generally, you have multiple victims, so you have several different sorts of evidence that you can go to and point towards. So anything dealing with serial killers, I do support the death penalty. And I guess I would also go as far as say serial rapists who are constantly in and out of the prison system.
In
They're
and
just
out.
going to go. No pun intended.
Like in and out, more ways than one.
Oh man, I did not even think about that one. That's a good one. But somebody's going to clip that. Anyway, so yeah, so those situations, I think I support the death penalty. And when we're talking rehabilitation, though, in some situations, actually, there was an interesting case I heard a while back. Well, it's a few different cases. It was a judge in a small town in America. I wish I could remember where now. But what he was doing was for petty crimes. For instance, one that they specifically talked about was theft, like small theft, like from a convenience store, stuff like that. The judge was essentially sentencing these people to wear a sign, and they had to walk in front of the place where they committed their crimes, and their sign would tell them what they did. The one guy I saw in particular, he had tried to rob this convenience store. I don't think it was like a violent robbery, he just tried to, pocket some stuff and get out. Right. So he was walking with a sign in front that said, "I tried to steal from this convenience store." And a lot of these people were saying that for them was worse than the prison system. That being like recognized and treated like shit by the society was actually a bigger punishment for them than being put away in a cell. So I've actually started.
I think I also heard about this judge. He would say, "Do you want like 30 days in prison or like 2 days of this?" And so they would have a choice. And I think someone, maybe another judge or something, was criticizing that this guy, it was like not traditional, but he always did offer a traditional punishment for the people. But a lot of the people actually would take the punishment that fit the crime instead.
Yeah, I think that was the judge. It sounds almost like exactly like the story. I forgot about that part where he at least offered them a choice between prison and doing this. Because I gotta say, like, even if it was like a petty crime, you only sentence you to a couple days doing that to public ostracism. I don't know. I would be really not want to do that. And maybe public ostracization is a form of punishment that we've lost these days.
I would probably take the public ostracizing over because I know what kind of people are in prison and stuff, and I don't want to have like a body cavity search and stuff. I mean, to be honest.
Fair enough. I was also just going to say that this might be a more effective punishment perhaps in somewhere like a small town rather than a big city, where a lot of the people that will pass you, it'll be like the one and only time you'll see them. If you're coming from a small town, at the very least.
I live in New York City, and there was someone I met in the Bronx, and then I ran into them in Brooklyn. And if you don't know, like, these are opposite ends of New York City.
Damn, that is a pretty big distance between these, especially because it's all islands too, like between Manhattan, right. Staten Island, and all that. Damn. That
well, the Bronx is part of like the mainland New York. Manhattan is an island, and then Brooklyn and Queens are on Long Island.
Okay, then.
Long Island.
But anyway.
But they're not really called Long Island because there's 2 counties that are generally called Long Island. But anyway, you were saying? Sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say that this might be more effective in a small town just because it's more likely the small towns have they have the stronger community builds. They tend to know each other a little better than like the bigger cities. So I was thinking something like that may be a little more effective in an area that's smaller where the population knows itself a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, when we're talking about drugs, what are your guys' opinions about those?
I'm not a fan.
I think that the criminalization of drugs has sort of this, it's demonstrated that the fight to limit them has cost more than actually doing treatment programs and actually dealing with the public health of the people that are the target of these drug peddlers. So I wouldn't say that I'm a big fan of drug enforcement policy right now.
Well, the drug war. Oh, what's that?
Or ever.
Or ever. Well, I was just going to say the drug war really hasn't done much to stem the flow of drugs. Actually, one thing that I would say that came out of the drug war is as they were sort of cracking down on local sources, this opened the way for foreign drug dealers and drug lords in order to push their drugs into it. There was an article out of Politico not too long ago. It was called How Obama Let Hezbollah Off the Hook. I don't know if any of you saw that, but it went into details about how Obama, his refusal to do anything about Hezbollah in the Middle East, it led to their rise to the point where they're actually now operating an international drugs trade. And what they're doing is they're pushing drugs into the U.S. through the Mexican cartels right now. So that was one thing I found that came out of the drug war. Not saying that that shouldn't mean that drugs should be legal. I'm actually not in favor of legalized drugs. I don't consider marijuana to be a drug, to be honest. I think it's a little ridiculous to put it on there. But at the same time, if we're just going to start throwing drug users into prison, it's not going to do any good for them for getting them off the drugs. There still seems to be a large connection in prison. People still manage to bring in drugs and outside products into the prison system, whether that be through guards or other means. So they're probably going to find their access to it, but they'll actually be willing to team up with some even shadier people and do some even shadier things just to get their hands on it.
Well, let's look at the example you brought up of Obama and Hezbollah, which I went on a rant on Logan's show one time where I said, it's very shameful that President Obama would discriminate against other cocaine dealers, of whom I know a few, who have no political affiliation, and let Hezbollah-affiliated cocaine abuser dealers off the hook. I was saying it, jokingly, but really, this has been the tradition of American drug policy, American crime-fighting policy when it comes to organized crime. You see over and over and over again, they have to, in order to nail down a case legally, they'll often cooperate with a rival syndicate or group of people or competitor and incriminate the target. Everybody's seen. Have you seen Narcos? Any of you guys, analytical people in the audience? Jimso?
I've seen like an episode or two. I actually haven't gotten that far into it. So but that was about
Pablo Escobar. Yeah. Analytical might have. Did she have a connection issue?
Possibly. It's happened in the past. I think she'll probably be back in a couple minutes.
Okay, so Narcos, if you know the story as it was, in order to pursue Escobar, they had to basically cut a lot of deals with the Cali cartel. I think they actually do talk about it in the series. So it's a real problem for people to say that, oh, our fight against drugs was so principled because Pablo Escobar was this bloodthirsty drug pusher or whatever. But in order to get him, we had to make a deal with a bloodthirsty drug pusher. In the 80s, if you've seen, there was a recent film called American Made about Barry Seal, a drug pilot in the 80s who actually there is credible evidence that he was connected to Governor Clinton at the time and the Bush administration. So I'm not letting either party off the hook. He was running cocaine from South America, from Colombia to the U.S. He was running arms to the Contras, fighting communism in Latin America. So this is not new. Sometimes we fight these criminals by engaging with criminals, or we use them. The heroin trade in Afghanistan. We were fine with it when it was going to Soviet troops in the Soviet Union. Now the Afghan heroin is coming here. Not so sexy, right? So, that's the price of having a drug war. Do I have a solution to it? I'd have to say I don't.
It's kind of hard to give to give it a solution on the problem. I mean, there's so many factors to take into consideration, and there's so many people willing to fill the vacuum of whether that be drugs or many other criminal enterprises, that it's really hard to give a one answer. You can't really if you stop the drugs from outside coming into your country, then you're not worrying about the drugs inside your country. If you're worrying about the drugs inside your country, you're not worrying about the foreign drugs. It's really a no-win situation, I don't think, which is why I have not been in favor of the drug war. But I felt, which actually this can bring us to maybe a little bit of a more interesting point, which is if we can't win the drug war through punishment, if we can't win it through force, then what about rehabilitation? Because the one thing that has been a contentious issue has been these safe injection zones for whether that be heroin or many other drugs. And those, some people like them because it gives these people a safe area. They're not out doing something bad or doing something shady. But then at the same time, are we encouraging the drug use?
Of course we are.
But
like one of my pet peeves with drugs, because I'm not a fan of drugs, is like they have these, what is it called, Nalox or whatever. They have these like pens to stick people with if they overdose, and it's like
Narcan.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, why are we like providing a tax dollars and out to these people who made these horrible decisions? I mean, like, this goes back to what I'm saying. Like, we don't make people pay the consequences of their actions. We punish like innocent conservatives for sharing their opinions. Our society, both societies, the American one, the Canadian one, someone is attacked for simply being a conservative, but at the same time, if you're a leftist, you get 1,000,001 passes. I mean, you even get away with murder. Hello, I'm looking at you, California, and that guy who killed Kate Steinle.
I actually thought you were going to make reference to Caitlyn Jenner, because a lot of people forget that she murdered somebody.
Oh.
I remember. Yeah, it was a manslaughter, but yeah, I get what you mean. It was a car crash.
Yeah. But
nice.
Just going back to the safe injection sites, I know a lot of people that argue for them. At least I'm more playing devil's advocate. I don't know. I fall somewhere
for them and the leftists.
What's that?
The drug addicts and the leftists.
I'm just more bringing up the other side of the argument. But what they usually brought up, what they usually end up saying is that if you don't, they end up dying on the streets. Which again,
Top Leaf wants to join.
Not my problem.
Top Leaf wants to join?
Yeah, he says he wants to put in his pro-drug argument.
Wants to do his drug argument?
Yeah, so.
Oh boy. Top Leaf, you might be coming in the wrong place, but I will send you the link if you like. Give me a
well,
sec,
I think the what would you call them? The stick stations or something?
The safe injection sites?
Yeah, where'd I get stick stations from? Whatever, safe injection sites. So I I wouldn't say that's the right way to talk about rehabilitation. I think it has to be, you know, people talk about preventative medicine all the time. You know, God knows I don't take care of myself like you know, I'm no like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, but the emphasis should be on education, health education. It's not really emphasized at all in schools. You know, there's drug diversion programs in education throughout throughout grade school and then into college, talking about really the health issues that may come up, and without using like the hyperbole and you know, if there's issues that, you know, cardiovascular things or you know, addiction problems or with meth, all of the various issues with, you know, how it destroys your teeth. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I don't think that these safe injection stations, I wouldn't be in support of that, even though I'm not quite as against drugs as AC.
Now, I hate to be like, because this is where I've said before, it's like I find myself on both sides. So I hate to be that moderate. I hate to be that, you know, dumbass centrist in this situation. Although, again, like I said, I ended up like 52-48. What's that?
I said just blame it on being Canadian.
All right, I'll blame it on being
indoctrination. It's their fault.
Well, anyway, what I was just going to say is I understand that when we're talking about personal responsibilities. People did make their choice. They made a bad choice. They got in these bad drugs. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you. I've had my opportunities in life to try these drugs, and I've never taken them because I know what they lead to. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I just want these people dying on the street. And that's why I don't know, like when it comes to these safe injection sites, it's like I want to help people, but then that's why I also fall on both sides because I don't want to encourage it. But then if we're not doing this, this is where more people end up getting sick and dying, and maybe even might be more of a burden on the system.
Well, how about we not let them be a burden on the system? I mean, well, Canada doesn't have the same, you know, foundation, but the foundation of the US was basically supposed to be one where, you know, the government doesn't take care of people. I mean, this is like a communist idea that, like, you know, the government pays for, you know, you have all these people. Well, somebody has, no, you know, I mean, America was founded that people are supposed to, you know, you take care of your own problems or you go to a charity or, you know, and if you can't, like, I mean, they don't have these problems in the East. Like, in China or whatever, if you can't eat, you die. You don't get food by the government, you know. In communist Russia, you know, people died all the time. They were starved to death, you know. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know. Maybe.
Who's Top Leaf?
Sorry about that.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, Top Leaf, go ahead.
Before you start, Top Leaf, I was just going to say I was muted. I didn't realize it, so that's why there was dead air there for a second. Go ahead, Top Leaf. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I hopped on to quickly say my position, which is legalize all drugs, including hard drugs like meth and heroin, have them readily available, have treatment centers for people who are going to use drugs, and make sure the information is out there, because that completely takes away any of the money that the criminals would receive from drugs. And if you look at it, all these gangs are receiving a majority of their money from drug sales. So if you take away the capital gains they can make through selling drugs, they're not going to be able to finance other sectors of their gang life. It literally all boils down to drugs. And if you legalize drugs, you take the money out of criminals, and there's no way they can run amok like they're doing now.
Well, as it stands,
addicts tend to be criminal themselves because they get so addicted. They do things like rob convenience stores to feed their habit.
And drunks don't?
Not to the same extent.
Yes, they do. They certainly do. You're more like, if you're a drunk, you're more likely to rob a convenience store than you are a smack addict.
Wait, so Top Leaf, do you think then, I'm against having these safe injection sites, but I'd say that having an emphasis on treatment centers and diversion programs. I would be in favor of legalizing a lot of, I don't know about all the drugs, but a lot of the drugs. Would you say that that's the better way to tackle addiction as opposed to, the prosecutorial attitude that's been going on for years? Or do you think I'm not going far enough?
Yeah, well, 100%. Because I mean, if you look at addiction, and Gabor Mate, who is a psychologist based out of Vancouver and has done lots of work with homeless people, has done some pretty conclusive research showing that the root of most addictions is psychological trauma, mostly rooted in childhood experiences. So you have to address those issues before you can cure someone of an addiction. So if you just send them to jail, you're not taking care of the actual problem. You're just slapping a Band-Aid on it. So that's not really beneficial for anyone. And you can get drugs in federal prisons. That people do that. It's a common thing. And then when you're putting these people in prison, then the taxpayer is paying for them. So if you keep putting these people in prison, the taxpayers are going to pay for them, and you're going to have higher incarceration rates, and it's just not going to be intuitive to living in a free society.
Well, the one thing I wanted to ask about the legalize all drugs too is just I'm thinking about the right now as we're waiting for our government to legalize marijuana. It seems from the sort of prices that they're putting out, it may still be cheaper to go to these illegal sources in order to get our weed or something. So yeah, I was wondering that could still be a problem.
I would think that once the free market catches up and people start out competing each other, the price will go down, though, because it doesn't make any sense that the price would stay high if you have like full legal access to it and you can legally grow dope, whereas previously it's been illegal to grow dope. So obviously it's a lot more risky. So not as many people would do it. It's just basic supply and demand. The supply will go up, and therefore the demand or price will go down. I don't see any reason it wouldn't.
So you think it's basic economics then?
Yeah.
Supply and demand.
I mean, you can get cheap, like super cheap, like 80% liquor on the reserve. People don't do that. Gets you way drunker for way cheaper, but people don't do that because, we have the option to just go get a 2.6.
I guess, but I don't know. I still just when we're thinking about some of these drugs, it's one thing to think about maybe if we're talking about mushrooms or coke. While those can be bad enough, I generally tend to look at how I look at two things. Number one, I'm looking at the really extreme drugs, something like PCP, which causes people to do some really bad shit. And I wouldn't really want that to be made more readily available for people. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that actually is sort of where the problem with the opioid crisis is coming these days. It seems that we've made drugs, the illegal drugs, the opioids, very easy to get for younger kids, and then now we're having a large problem of overdose right now.
Yeah, the whole overdose scenario in Vancouver and Alberta, and I guess you guys haven't really got it out east yet, have you?
The opioid crisis?
Yeah, with fentanyl and all that.
Oh yeah, it's over here now.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's heartbreaking, right? Because you're not seeing that it's just these junkies that are dying, right? It's people that are getting fentanyl mixed in with other party drugs, and they'll be doing small amounts and then they'll overdose. I have a friend who just a couple weeks ago he was doing something else and it was laced with fentanyl and he had to be taken to the hospital. Oh, and geez. They had to give him 20 doses of Narcan, which is pretty absurd considering usually you only have to give 3 or 4 doses, right? And so it's really coming into our society in many facets, and I don't think the way we're attacking it right now is at all helpful. No one's winning in this scenario. It's just getting worse and worse and worse, and we're spending more and more money. So I don't understand why we're just going to keep trying to go with the status quo when it's been proven for almost 100 years that it objectively does not work.
Well, when we talk about fentanyl, that is a problem. Don't get me wrong, that is going around. But we're having more than that. We're also having prescription drugs have become the new norm for high school students. It seems to be affecting mostly the poorest communities and the richest communities, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
But I can't help but feel that it has to do with more pharmacare programs that are being offered around the country, and it has to do with the more easier access to the drugs rather than the fact that, I guess that's that it has more to do with the easier access to the drug where this crisis has come from. As we started putting more people on pills and just making them more readily available, people are using it for their high now.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ritalin's meth, right? Like, we all know that it's meth, and it's being prescribed to boys who are 10 years old, right? So how is that any better than people who willingly want to go out and do
Ritalin is
drugs?
not methamphetamine. It's methylphenidate.
Yeah, but it's very, very similar on the chemical level, and they both have very, very
It's not
similar
that
effects.
similar.
It's 100% like
It's
I've
really
done
not.
Ritalin before to study and recreationally, and it is.
What's this?
I've done Ritalin both to study and recreationally, and it's a fucking hell of a high. I'll tell you that right now. It's insane.
How many milligrams?
I don't know.
You don't know, so you're
I
telling
had
me,
no idea.
but you have no idea how much you took.
No, just a couple pills.
Yeah, that's what kind of pills? Like, how much were the pills?
I don't know. We're mine. They're my friends.
Generally the equivalent of like a street, what they would take like from a street drug would be like 10 pills. So
Okay, all I'm saying is in my experience that it's a pretty hectic high.
Couple of drinks, Randy.
That's a good one.
R.I.P. in peace, Liquor Prince.
What's that?
R.I.P. in peace, Liquor Prince.
Do any of you guys watch Trailer Park Boys? I know you're from Canada.
Oh yeah,
Adrian. So
Hell yeah.
every episode.
Yeah.
two Canadians, two American Jews.
Do you watch it Analytical? You watch that show?
No, I don't
Oh
watch
my God. She's got to watch that show. Assignment for next week.
Watch Trailer Park Boys. But what we were starting off talking more about the safe injection sites, though, and whether those should be made accessible. So, when we're talking about that, Top Leaf, would you? Well, actually, sorry, not Top Leaf. Analytical Chick. Would you support it more if it was on a privatization, that it wasn't coming from tax money, but it was a private company that was willing to dish out the money to do this?
Dish out the money to do what?
To hold these safe injection sites. If it was all privatized and it didn't have anything to do with tax money. No, not at all?
No.
So then when it comes to when it comes to doing something. And
wait, what was the question? Can you guys repeat it?
I was saying that would she be more in favor of the safe injection sites if it was all privatized and it wasn't had anything to do with
how would you even privatize that?
I don't know, but I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion.
Like donations or something? I mean, or
yeah,
like
it would be a nonprofit. I think in Rochester they have something like that.
I'm sure there's probably people that would be willing to donate to a site like that.
Yeah, George Soros.
No, I mean I think there's plenty of drug legalization people that believe in the stick station. I keep calling it a stick station. I'm going to stick with it. So I think there's people that will support it. I wouldn't want one in my city, so I'd rather have like local ordinances and say, screw this. I don't want a bunch of junkies walking around basically harassing people, stuff like that at the stick station. That you'd have to also, if you were to permit it, you would have to put ordinances in there over where it can be. You don't want a bunch of junkies hanging around near either a school or a church or other community centers like an IHOP or something.
Well, I was going to say that
is now a community center.
Look at Miss Highbrow here. This is I don't need an IHOP, but I'm saying but there are certain communities where, I think it would probably make a little more sense. That's why I think in Seattle, for example, I believe that they have it in Vancouver is like the most famous example, right, Jim? So
Yeah, I would say so. Actually, that is actually a question for Topley if he lives in that area.
Yeah, how's it working over there?
Vancouver residents. For the safe injection sites.
Yeah, how is it over there?
As far as I know, it hasn't stopped any overdoses. I'm pretty sure that the instances of overdoses because like people do overdose in these safe injection sites, right? Like there's a lot of obviously there's a lot more provisions that are at these safe injection sites, so you can get your smack tested, but I know many don't because you have to give up some of your smack if you want to get it tested. Come on, that's not a good deal. You only got so much, right? And so there's overdoses that happen there. I hardly ever see people shooting up out in the street anymore, like ever. Like
well, that's actually something I was going to get to when it came to the section safe injection sites, was the fact that Bold, you were saying that you don't want a bunch of like drug dealers and crackheads around schools and stuff, but I feel like these safe injection sites could actually pull some of these crackhead and drug dealers away from those sites. If you strategically place them in certain areas of the city, you can pull them away from schools and areas where there's a lot of children present. And one of the reasons... Oh, go ahead.
So then here's another question. If there's property owners around or business owners, do they get a say whether that goes there? It would probably bring their value down. It would probably drive away customers. I mean, I think it's a local issue. If a municipality is willing to do it, they can bring the plague upon themselves. I'm not going to say that I'd want an injection site where I live.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the downtown east side, but it's a few blocks in downtown Vancouver that is akin to Tent City. Like it's just, if there's no businesses other than pawn shops that are operating there. There's only like sparsely there's no business there, frankly, and that's where the injection sites are. So it's not an area that people are really wanting to do business anyways. So I don't think there's been much of an outcry over that because there's no business there because it is such a seedy neighborhood. It's not like we built the injection site in some upper class suburban neighborhood, right? It's where all the junkies hang out. And in Vancouver, that happens to be in a very concentrated area, and you don't see a lot of homelessness kind of outside of that area. So it's like their own little cutaway of the city, right? So to answer that question.
Well, I also would say that right now, when I think of downtown in my city, we just have those homeless drug dealers that are out, homeless drug users, crackheads and stuff that are just out and about anyway. And they tend to harass people on the street regardless, like, people going into bars or just trying to go about their daily business. So that's why I was almost thinking that these safe injection sites could pull these people away from it. Now, that being said, like, I know right now I'm being more defensive of the sites, but I do have problems with it because I do see it as I do see it as encouraging drug users, which is something I don't want to do. But I really think that maybe some of the reasons has more to do with the failure of teaching children about drugs when in the school program, because I remember my health education in school for drugs, it was crap. It was crap. All they would do is, here's the drug, here's what it does, don't do it. That was more or less the worst that they did. When it came to drinking then, they brought out everything, they brought out the Mothers Against Drunk Driving videos and all the graphic details, but they don't do that for drugs. I actually think this might be more of a failure on the school system than anything else. No? Nobody else thinks so?
Yeah, no, I
agree.
Agree.
I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay, fair enough. For a second, I was like, maybe I just went off on a tangent for nothing.
No, I 100% agree. I don't even remember learning about drugs in school. So maybe that's because I was stoned all the time and I just couldn't remember it, but who knows?
We did learn about drugs, but it really wasn't a very intelligent presentation of it. So, I think that if you give people more depth and more problems with and more of the long-term health effects, and by the way, I think don't stop with drugs. I mean, kids should be encouraged to, just pursue healthier lifestyles in general. It's a lot of this fat legitimation right now. It's saying that obesity is just as desirable as fitness. It's also a problem. Issues like what type of food people eat, things like that. There should be more education and emphasis on it. There's probably a number of countries that do it better than us. We should probably look at their educational methods and take the best of it without having this, like Top Leaf is talking about, this prohibitionist approach to drug policy. I think is counterproductive to a large extent. So I think, yeah, absolutely. If you had bad drug education in school, you're probably not alone.
Well, I think one of the difference too, I would say, when we're talking about prohibition and alcohol back in like the 20s and 30s, and when we're talking about drug prohibition today, is alcohol for a long time has always been a very common drug. It's always been a common drink. Like one of the oldest recipes that we have that we can trace back is actually a beer recipe, which I think is like 7,000 years old or something like that. So alcohol has actually played a very prominent role in human society, where when we're talking about some of the drugs that are available these days, that's well, they maybe even
people drank alcohol before they drank water. I don't know if you knew that.
Actually, yeah, in ancient Greece, there was so much contaminated water that they used to turn it into wine. I think it was very similar in Rome as well, just because of all the contaminated water that they used to make wine out of it instead, and that was their main drink.
Right. Yeah.
Now,
it's on like I think a Modern Marvels or something.
Now, let's change this up a little bit, because we've been talking about drugs for a while, and we have everybody's opinion on that.
Well, that's my cue to leave then. Bye, guys.
Oh, that's all you wanted in for? Yeah. He just came in to defend drugs. What a guy.
Like a true Canadian.
Drugs are sweet. I love them, even though I don't do them. I don't condone drug use, but legalize it,
I have a question for Top Leaf.
Yeah, I got an answer.
Did you vote for Jihadi Justin?
No, I did not.
That's my boy.
Woo!
Good.
Can people agree that cocaine is a hell of a drug?
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Can we all agree it's probably the best drug out there?
Charlie Murphy!
You're missing out. You're missing out.
I love that. I had a sergeant in the Army who did the best impression of that. It was spot on.
I think my
IDF, right?
Wait, was Top Leaf seriously dipping out?
Yeah, I think he just came in to defend the drugs. I mean, he was welcome to stay, but yeah, I think he just came in. My guess is he probably was doing something. He's in school too, so I think he just jumped in to join that part of the chat, and then he's probably going back.
Oh, okay.
That's too bad. I mean, I don't know if Maddodge is still watching, but man. Geez,
Well, I guess the floor is yours, so I mean, let's. What do you have next?
All right. Well, the next one I wanted to go at actually had to do with torture, because there's been a lot. Sorry, excuse me.
I would like to see Hillary tortured.
Hillary Clinton. Well, if you saw her in India, was it India? I think she was in. Looked like she was being tortured. She was falling left, right, and center.
Oh yeah, I saw those clips.
She just had a hand fracture while in the bathtub, I think.
I heard about that. She got treated in their hospitals, and they say that there is no conspiracy about Hillary Clinton's health.
Oh, one of the YouTubers I watched was like, it shouldn't be surprising. Everybody knows cows can't do stairs or something.
Ouch. That hurts. Yeah, but anyway, I just want to also we can maybe, how long have we been going for? About an hour and a half. So maybe this will probably be the last topic of the night. But talking about torture, because that is one has always been a contentious issue. We've had it throughout all our years in history, and I would say that recently this is where people have really started speaking up, saying that maybe we should do away with torture for a number of reasons. They say whether it's inhumane, or they say it's an inefficient way of getting information for people. As far as I can tell, overall, I'm not a huge, so I really don't support torture, except in very extreme circumstances, such as maybe if this would be, again, very extreme, but if we needed, say, codes to a nuclear bomb that was going off or something, then I could support it in that regards. But from the average day-to-day interrogation of foreign fighters or prisoners, it seems that from what I've heard, the more effective way is to try and win them over to your side rather than just, you know, hooking their nuts up to a car battery.
I don't agree. I mean, if you're talking about people who are like devoted to the other side and devoted to torturing Americans, I don't think we should be pussyfooting around with them.
I think that would depend. I mean, if we're talking about more someone from ISIS right now, I could see what you're saying with that because they have a strong ideology. But for the average
then again,
soldier,
you know, then Canada might turn around and give them $10 million for it.
I know. I can't tell you how ashamed I am of that. Don't worry. I'm completely ashamed of that.
I would have loved to hear what Top Keck had to say about that.
You know it's bad when Jihadi Jack is saying, I don't want to go back to the UK. Can I go to Canada? You know it's bad when. But anyway, I was just going to say, for the average, like...
Yeah, they're like, too many Muslims in the UK. I want to go to Canada. It's going to be like that way in a few years.
But for the average soldier that's going to go into a battlefield, they're usually not mired in ideology. So it seems that it'd be much easier to win these people over through whether it means protecting their family or bringing them into, whether a lot of them, they don't want to live in their country anymore. But whatever happens to be the means, a lot of people have said in the past that they found that the most effective way was to try and win over the soldier rather than to torture him. I've seen a couple of people that were either from the CIA. I can see if I can find something for you.
The CIA, a bunch of leftists. No, I don't. No. You can't win these people over. These people are raised on hating America. They come out of the womb and like right away it's like hate America, hate America. You know, like this is the first thing they're taught. This is what they're taught. This is what they know. To hate America, to hate the West. Death to America.
Some of them, like, yeah, okay, yes, all right. I shouldn't pussyfoot around that one. Yes, okay, they are told that. They are told they hate America and stuff. But I've also found that, at least if we're talking about Islamic soldiers right now, breaking them of their religion seems to be the most effective way to break them from that, because it seems like trying to convert them to another religion hasn't worked, but breaking them from their religion has been the most effective way. We got a lot of ex-Muslims in the Middle East right now that don't uphold those ideologies. Because I don't know, it just seems like if we're hooking them up and, you know, we're cutting off pieces of their body, they're more likely to double down, or they're more likely to just give you a piece of useless information just to make the pain stop, the torture stop.
I mean, if you're talking about, like, people who have killed Americans and stuff, like Cotter was, I don't agree. You can't say that these people aren't hardened against the West. I think that's crazy. Of course they are. Of course they are.
Oh, I gave you that. I conceded that point to you. I was going to say maybe not, and then I said I shouldn't pussyfoot around that one. I conceded at least that point to you.
There you go.
But I still think that, like, again, I say that breaking the religion is probably the most effective way. Bold, what do you think about... What's that?
I say you can't.
You say you can't?
I say you can't.
Do you mean
I don't think it's possible.
Do you mean for these extremists, these fighters, or you just mean as a general?
The extremist fighters, for sure. I mean, we are talking about torture, so we're talking about people who could potentially be sent to a place like Gitmo. So, yeah, someone who is hardcore enough to be sent there is hardcore enough that you can't just change their mind.
What do you think about that, Bold?
I'm not sure which question I'm answering.
Well, you know what? Why don't you just start with your overall view on torture?
Look, when I think a lot of the conversation on torture has been reignited by the new CIA director, Haspel, and I'm not crazy about having torture overseas in some of these what are they called, black sites or whatever. But I would say the real problem I have with the CIA is the surveillance of civilians, which is American civilians more specifically, which is a violation of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. As far as torture, there's no constitutional provision that prohibits the U.S. from torturing, a combatant that's not explicitly a military serviceman in a foreign war. Many of these people who are foreign operatives for one of these organizations, they're explicitly hiding their identity as a combatant. They're hiding as civilians, and then they want to use the right to, they want to use all of the benefits of both prisoners of war and civilian suspects in the United States. That's not the way it's ever worked. In fact, during World War II, it was generally understood that spies could be tortured because they violated the rules of war, because you need to be marked in order for the enemy to understand who you are. So, as a principle, I wouldn't say that I'm, terribly torn up about torture, but you have to be mindful that, first of all, there's a lot of people who could have the wrong name. I served in the West Bank, so there are a lot of people who have the same name, literally the same name. So what do you do if you're torturing a guy and then you find out after 10 hours that he's the cousin of the guy you're looking for? Shouldn't he be able to sue you? I think it's a real problem. So, the idea that you're able to torture somebody because of, it's the war and because of Islam.
Well, no, I think you should have a decent amount of proof that you have the right person.
Well, that's the thing, that you're doing the torture with
They actually saw him killing Americans before they put him. Cotter, the one that
Cotter, yeah, but you're bringing up one case. I'm talking about people who are suspects, that they, there is no basis of proof against them yet, that you may have just received a tip about them or something. So there are issues there. Some of these people who get caught, for example, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, there was a lot of there were a lot of issues concerning his arrest. I think it was in the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken. No, it might have been in Pakistan, and he was extradited to the U.S. Partially thanks to our relationship with Pakistan, and there's plenty of evidence against him. I think in the end, I don't even know if he received a military or a civilian trial. So that's a borderline issue, whether it's a civilian or military combatant. Then there's if any of you remember this preacher from Florida. I don't even think he was a preacher. I think he was just an official in the Islamic Jihad organization. His name was Sami al-Aryan. He stretched it out for a long time. He was basically the head of the Islamic Jihad organization. So he used all of the civilian liberties, the civil liberties of the U.S. justice system, to claim that it was a witch hunt against him. But there was plenty of evidence that he was an operative of the organization. There was plenty of financial evidence. There was a paper trail, everything. So did the civil liberties help bring justice in that case? I believe he went free. So, I don't think that the torture is what the focus should be on. The focus should be on improving, investigative methods. And to some extent that includes, honey trapping some of these people into ratting people out, using good methods to gain human intelligence, not just surveillance and things like that. So, yeah, I think that if you overdo the torture, then it really defeats the purpose. So, I don't know, maybe that was too complicated of an answer, but, that's what I think.
The baseline point is you torture somebody, Canada pays them back.
Exactly.
I am still bitter about that.
Nothing.
I am still bitter about that, so I'm going to keep throwing that joke out there. I don't care if it's an old one. But anyway, what about if we're talking about, because EC, I'm actually curious about your point of view on this, though.
Okay.
What about if we're talking about citizens? local citizens. So somebody you think in America, an American, who may have some information.
No, I don't think American citizens should be tortured.
Okay, so yours is really, it has more to do with actually the one thing about your point I have noticed is at least yours is a little more consistent than mine, because you're at least saying Americans no, foreign enemies yes. So you kind of got me in a bind with that one, I will admit.
I mean, in general, I have issues with the illegals and the anchor baby concept, but for someone who's basically an American, like, you know, our Constitution is supposed to protect us. You know, I mean, I'm bitter about this idea that the left has that our Constitution is supposed to apply to foreigners. Like, no, I mean, no.
I absolutely agree with you, because that's exactly what these sanctuary cities are doing, and that's what the left is trying to suggest right now, is the fact that these people who, even though they've entered America and they're not citizens and they even entered illegal, they should be protected under this Constitution, which I agree with you on that one. I completely disagree with that notion whatsoever. And the only thing and that's actually where I am much more hardline, is these sanctuary cities. It's just undermining both state and federal government. We can say screw the federal government, but it is undermining the state rights. Exactly what America was founded on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the United States Constitution, one of the requirements of the federal government is to defend our borders. And so they're not kidding when they say that, like, they're interfering. I mean, it's not there's very few things that are, according to the Constitution, given to the federal government, but one of them is to protect and defend our borders. And, you know, they have a duty to do that, and yet we have state governments that are standing in the way of that. It's obstruction of justice. It's treason. It's, what's the other one? Oh, harboring fugitives on a large scale.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, you got a point on that. They are fugitives technically, and they are being harbingered. Well, these are the same people, like these, a lot of these sanctuary cities, these mayors are the same ones that are then going to turn around and say that Trump did something illegal. No, they'll make some ridiculous collusion of Russia having to do influencing the election. It's a narrative that won't die, the Russian narrative. It will not die. I mean,
the left owns the mainstream media, and they're just gonna keep pushing that out. They're trying to use that kind of stuff to win 2018, and I keep telling conservatives, like, we don't have the mainstream media. Like, we all have to talk to everyone we know. We have to get people to vote, because if every single conservative did that, if they actually voted in local elections and they actually talked to, you know, if every single conservative talked to a handful of people they knew, we could wake up all of the conservatives. There's more conservatives there in America than there are leftists. But the problem is, you know, like, you try to talk to these people, they're basically conservative, and you tell them, like, I told somebody one time, I'm like, you know, they're trying to rescind, you know, the First Amendment. And they have something that's, like, they have a bill that's in there trying to become a law that would essentially negate the First Amendment. And instead of, you know, saying, well, gosh, that's horrible, I'm gonna, you know, start telling people about this, instead, the person goes, whatever, it's not going to pass. And then they move on. And this is what conservatives do by and large. Oh, you know, there's not enough of us. Yes, there are. You know, what are some of the other things I hear? I just hear all these excuses to not get involved. The left doesn't do that. The left is like, what? You know, you know, every, like, lying narrative they hear, they involved. And I part of it is the left gets like teenagers and college kids who are like living off of family members, but you know, here they're living off of family members who are conservative. You know, how about conservatives stand up to their family members that are out there trying to destroy our nation? The leftists have no problem blocking their own family members on Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. Well, mostly Facebook. But I mean, leftists have no problem doing that. And conservatives, they just won't. Conservatives refuse to have a backbone, and it makes me so furious. If we all, like, you know, woke up and stood up, and this is one of the few things the alt-right has this right. They talk about this. The only thing is their solution is to go into conservative spaces and to shit talk the Jews. You know, I mean, you know, okay, I can understand that there are a lot of Jews on the left, and you know, they have a lot of control, but they don't care. They will still alienate Jews who are on the right wing. And I know Bold said he doesn't consider himself a Republican, but I think he's at least, you know, libertarian.
Yeah, I think for some reason the Libertarian Party is doing everything it can to make me vote Republican. It's very annoying.
But I mean, you basically have like a right-wing mentality from what I can tell.
Yeah, on a number of issues, I'd say I'm very, very right-wing in terms of economics, especially, and in terms of taste. You know, for example, with gay rights, I'm not for, you know, peeking into stalls at the what's it called, the truck stops and hauling people to jail. But in terms of taste, I think we should be able to make fun of anybody for any lifestyle. It's you know, I think freedom of speech trumps all of this crap about the diversity and you know, loving one another. You know, there was once a man who you know, he was so freedom of speech that we couldn't contain him. His name was Teddy Roosevelt, so we had to send him to Africa and he had to kill a bunch of animals. So, you know, he was a great president. Stepped on a lot of people's toes, but you know, undefeated, baby. I don't know if that explains anything, but I'm getting a bit goofy here because I'm reading somebody's replies to some articles, so sorry about that. But yeah, I agree with Analytical on a lot of these topics.
I think I tend to be also like, I think I'm even more stronger of an opinion. I think that one of the biggest problems we have is that, you know, like I just said, conservatives are just not willing to like stand up and push back. And that is what we need to do. I mean, the worst part is that our politicians won't do it. Like, most of the Republicans aren't paleocons. They're neocons. And neocons are like not real conservatives. This is why a lot of people don't like the Republican Party, is because it's full of neocons. I mean, so I'm a Republican, but like, I'm not like a partisan hack. You know, if it comes down to like a neocon, I will speak out against them. But I mean, the Democratic Party certainly doesn't have anything to offer me. So, I mean, I'm basically a conservatarian.
I've been noticing it the same thing too. The parties in my country, the Conservative Party, they don't really have much of a backbone either. I was talking about this not too long ago, but I was saying how these conservatives, they say that they are conservative, but then they won't. A good example of this was the leader of our federal Conservative Party. He's a Roman Catholic, but he has said full out he will not open debate on abortion, even though abortion, there is practically no laws up here. So this is a man who talks about conservatism, and he wants to bring conservatism back to Canada, but he can't even stand up for his own principles. But I'm actually surprised that more conservatives aren't willing. Now, some have said that the abortion debate in Canada, at least, isn't one that can really, like, it's not one that conservatives can stand upon. Maybe there's just too many pro-choice people in Canada. But I've noticed that we're starting to see this rise in conservatism here. there was just recently the leader who was voted to the Ontario Conservative Party. He's being compared in a lot of ways to Donald Trump for the way that he's going in and what he wants to do. There seems to be a rise in traditional conservatism in Canada, and this message really seems to be hitting a lot of people well. In fact, one thing I thought was the most ironic thing ever was, if you saw the article, after Black Panther came out, there was an article that said 10 ways that Black Panther is actually a conservative movie. And it just talked about things such as how Black Panther spoke about how there was a problem with fathers in the Black community and things like that. It seems like many people are actually like a conservative message as long as they don't know it's a conservative message.
I can see that.
It just seems to go all back to the propaganda that we hear, because I remember, again, when I was younger and more on the left, I really did think that right-wing authoritarianism and extremism was the biggest problem in the world before. I thought that the right was way more violent than the left, and that was the side that was more likely to end up in a dictatorship and mass murders. But a lot of this I found out as I got older and started. What's that?
And now you're waking up.
Now I'm waking up. I mean, like, I almost heard nothing about communism in school, aside for the very brief how they branch over it. Oh, this was communism. It was in Russia. This is what they believed. All right, moving on. Yeah, and it's just in this propaganda against the right.
This is why we need people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s who were actually taught this stuff in school, or, you know, my age and older. I was in school starting in the 80s. So elementary school, I heard about the Cold War, but it was like most of it was when they were already, you know, Gorbachev and Reagan and actual negotiations. So, but somebody who is a little bit older than me, anybody who's like 50 and older, should actually be able to remember like real hard Cold War. And in the 60s, they used to do drills where they like have to jump under their desk and put their hands on their head as if that was going to stop a bomb. But anyway.
Actually, I think the funniest Cold War commercial I ever saw was a family out for a picnic, and then the bomb goes off. So what did the mother and father do? They throw the picnic blanket over top them and their child, as if this is supposed to stop them from getting incinerated by the nuclear bomb.
God.
There was a lot of propaganda going around back in those times, and there had to be, at least from the American side too, because they were fighting Russian propaganda all the freaking time at those times. So it kind of made sense that they had to push that narrative out there, because right now American propaganda is heavily losing against postmodernism and communism propaganda. And it probably is exactly as you said, AC. It's just the fact that modern day conservatism doesn't have a spine. And this is actually being an argument that's being used to fuel like far right. They're actually using this and saying, what do conservatives conserve? You know, that is their big insult towards conservatives.
I saw this morning in the comment section of James Alsop put out a video, and that's what like all the alt-right jumped on. And the thing is, I'm not a fan of, I don't think the alt-right is really conserving anything either. I mean, what are they changing or conserving by jumping into conservative sites and overwhelming them with all this crap about, you know, the kike and, you know, it's the Jews. I mean, you know, they'll jump into like the side chat of, he doesn't live stream as much anymore, but Tim Pool would be live streaming, and they kept giving $14.88. And eventually I learned like what was going on there. But like, you know, they would overwhelm the chat with like $14.88, and all the people would give super chat as like $14.88. At one point I actually thought that maybe that was the minimum you could donate or something, because that's what so many people gave. And you know, it's not like they're going to change the minds of anybody. You know, I think more people have left a lot of people who might have been interested in the alt-right have wanted to distance themselves from it because it has become about Jew hate. I mean, when you're talking about just preserving, you know, something that white people have to offer, and, you know, like, if you're familiar with Wife with a Purpose, I like her channel. She considers herself alt-right, but, like, she doesn't talk about all this Jew hate stuff. She talks about, like, why is it okay for, you know, all, you know, Asia for the Asians, Africa for the Africans, you know, South America for the Latinos, like, where for the white people? Like, you know, that's a fair statement, you know, and pushing back against, like, if they say there's no white culture, she'll be like, what do you mean there's no white culture? So all of these things, you know, I mean, when it comes down to, like, just the white issue, I totally support it. But and if you even qualify your statement about Jews with saying, like, legitimately talking about, you know, that there's an unusual number and stuff like that, because I can even get behind that, because, you know, leftist Jews are absolutely toxic, and every right-wing Jew knows this.
And there's at least a hell of a lot more left-wing Jews out there, I've noticed, as well, than right-wings.
It's like 75% of Jews vote on the left and 25% vote on the right. And one of the other problems is the ones that are on the left tend to be very vocal, and the ones that are on the right, they pretty much stick to echo chambers. Like, there are some Jewish Republican, or, like, I'm in one Facebook group that's like Jewish, patriotic Jewish Republicans, and in another group, politically conservative Jewish women, because we have a conservative Jewish group. Like, conservative Jews is also a thing. As far as, like, there's 3 kinds of Judaism, and so it's Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. There's also Reconstruction, but that's, like, super, super tiny. So, you know, you have these groups that are just, or people who are Jewish and politically conservative, they tend to have all Facebook friends who are also that. So there's a lot of conversations that go on right on people's statuses and on people's pages. But get these people to get into, like, a mainstream conservative space, they don't want to leave Facebook and come to YouTube, because they don't want to deal with the alt-right. And they tell me that point blank. They're like, you're very brave for dealing with the alt-right. We don't want to deal with them. They just want to hide from them. And that's one of the differences between, it's the difference between conservatives and leftists, but it's highlighted in Jewish conservatives too. They hide, you know, they have strong views, but, you know, you have to coax the views out of them. Whereas the left is in your face, and you better, you know.
Well, Bold, 2 things, actually. First, I was going to say, I noticed that in the chat you were talking to Arjun. Arjun is a great person to talk to, so if you want to have him on your show, I'd highly recommend it. And the other thing I was going to say is, you actually brought this up in your article, I believe, for the Hard News Network, where you said that these days a lot of Jews seem to be like, all they want to do is they want to make sure that they're in good standings with the progressive side. Could you mind expanding on that idea a little bit? Like, what is the real reason behind them being so hardcore progressives, or wanting to be accepted by the progressives?
Yeah, you guys are gonna have to hear me out, because it might take a bit of time. But I was also distracted because I'm trolling some on an NPR thread, so I apologize for.
I noticed you said, like, who wants to go on a trolling spree in the chat? Yeah, I saw that. I was wondering.
This is so awesome that I don't even. Damn it! I can't even tag this dude. Facebook sucks, man. So Arjun we'll figure out something later because this is too big to pass up. But you asked about people wanting to be accepted, and I think one of the real problems is that, like, I think Analytical was talking about it, that you look at the progressive denominations of Judaism, and they have this desire to fit in with Western philosophy, as opposed to learning Western philosophy and learning the contrasts between it and the Jewish religion. So what they do instead is they forego learning about the Jewish religion and try to shoehorn certain progressive concepts into Judaism. And the most famous one would be the idea of tikkun olam, which is their principle of fixing the world or repairing reality. That's a concept much more common in Reform and Conservative and Reconstructionist Judaism than it is in Orthodox Judaism. And that's a very progressive belief system. And, Analytical, I think, would agree with me. But
yeah, I think we talked about this on the Jew streaming the other night.
The Jew streaming?
Yeah, we did one with a guy named Halsey, interesting guy.
Wait, Halsey?
Yeah. Have you seen that guy? I've seen him before too.
Is he like Halsey? I know, like, who
Halsey
was
English.
on
Yeah.
Live a couple times.
That's the dude, right?
Oh shit! No way. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yes.
we were on his channel.
Oh, that's awesome, actually. Yeah, he. I liked his debates though when he was in with them. Like they were interesting.
Yeah, he was on Blood Sports on Warskis.
So going on, the idea of tikkun olam actually comes from a passage in, I believe, the book of Psalms, where it says to correct the world in the kingdom of the Lord, and they leave that part out because if you don't know, a lot of Reform Jews are not exactly they don't believe in God as has been traditionally taught through the Bible and the Torah and the Talmud.
Yeah, they're like social synagogues.
Right, they're more of a Unitarian belief system. There's a Unitarian church. Are you familiar with it, Adrian?
Not very much, no.
So the Unitarians are along the same lines. They believe in more of a ecumenical faith where all different religions have their validity and they want to bring humanity together, and that's the belief system of progressive Judaism. So the later stages of that are that maybe there is no God, right? Who's to say? I mean, I don't know. I've never seen him over at the the rec center or anything, so it's possible he doesn't exist. That's basically the logical conclusion when you don't teach your kids at least the foundations of your religion. I'm not telling people to cloister their kids away like some people do, but the results of progressive aspects of all religions are that they eventually abandon a belief in a real theology and the fundamental principles of their religion. And you see that with a lot of people, not just in Judaism, but in who went to Catholic schools or who went to mainline Protestant schools. I'm assuming that there's some parallels in Islam. If you know who, what's that guy's name? Raheem Kassam is. Do you guys know who he is? Works for Breitbart. He grew up as an Ismaili Muslim, and they're not very strict on a lot of the rules of Islam. So it happened to be he grew up a very secular person, and he is atheist. Which I'm not saying that you should enforce the belief in God. I think that's the wrong approach too. But the reason that so many, to get to your original question, so many of these progressive Jews are just wimps and they don't know how to stand up for themselves is because they don't have any greater belief that in their own heritage. Okay, a lot of the problem has to do with the emphasis on social aspects of Jewish education. The use of the Holocaust, for example. I might piss off Analytical here, but I think that it's overemphasized. I think you need to emphasize the other.
I would agree with you on that.
The other thousands of years of Jewish history, for example,
this is something Orthodox Jews occasionally talk about, but we don't talk to any. You're not Orthodox, right?
Are you talking to me or Adrian? Adrian,
huh?
Adrian, are you Catholic?
No, I'm an atheist. Actually, I'll be honest.
Okay, but were you born atheist?
No. My parents always were a little more secularist. They sent me to church when I was younger. They wanted me to make my own decisions for that. And for me, really, it's just, I don't believe that there might be a God, but I'm not represented by the atheist community. I actually have some big problems with the way they operate. For me, I just don't really, I have a lack of belief. That's really
so you're like an agnostic, kind of.
Yeah, maybe a little closer to that than a hardcore atheist. Yes, I would say that I'm 99% sure that that there isn't a God, but I leave that door open because I don't know.
Christianity that you have, like, what's your reference point for it?
Like, what do you mean?
What kind of denomination did they send you to when you were like really, really little, or what have you?
I think I was sent to a Protestant church. There was one that was close to our house, so that was the one. And our neighbors were very active in it, so they used to take me with me on Sundays. So that one, I would say, I believe it was the Protestant church we were most active in. Or like that I was a little bit active in when I was.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of general, but okay. But I was asking Bold, like, you're not Orthodox, right?
Yeah, I'd say I am Orthodox.
Oh, you are? Like,
yeah, I go to an Orthodox synagogue, and I wouldn't say that I'm particularly tied down to let's say I wouldn't say I'm very developed in the belief system, but I do learn and I read a lot and I talk to people, and my dad's Orthodox. My mom was completely secular. But I'd say that growing up, I had relatives who were from the progressive streams of Judaism, and it always seemed like kind of, to be fair, kind of a joke to me.
So for me, I'm like modern Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
So like you would go to temple then every every Saturday, Sunday?
Yeah.
No?
What? No, I go every Saturday to we call it the synagogue.
Oh, synagogue, my mistake.
Reform Jews call it temple.
Yeah, the Reformed Jews call it a temple, and the conservative and Orthodox Jews call it a synagogue.
Now, because you two are Jewish, I actually want to ask you a question about this. Something that the alt-right has really been pushing these days, but I haven't been able to figure out why they've been pushing this, aside for complete denial, is when they've been, and maybe it's just trolling, but they say Hitler did nothing wrong. Is that a complete denial of the Holocaust, or is there something more to that I'm not picking up on? Is it just a complete denial that the Holocaust ever happened?
I'm not really sure. I think it's mostly a troll that they all repeat without even understanding it themselves.
Okay, I've been seeing it around more and more. I follow one guy.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I'm talking about when I say, like, they think they're going to change. Instead of going into, I have suggested going to sites where you're going to get people who are politically asleep and like dropping some sorts of truth bombs, like about communism or something like that. But instead, what they do is they go into conservative areas and they go, Hitler did nothing wrong. The Jews did it. Jews did 9/11. The Jews and the Saudis are in bed together, like just all this, Talmudic, and they talk about leftist Jewish behavior, and then they call it Talmudic or Zionist, which is crazy because the left doesn't know about the Talmud. It's the right that studies the Talmud, but they use all these like obscure passages that nobody like really knows, and then they say like Jews are like all these things that Jews aren't. And
Jesus, it seems like you guys can't do anything without getting some harassment of some kind.
Well, yeah, I mean, we get pinched from the left and the right, is how people put it. Although I don't know, in a way, I do consider the alt-right a leftist movement, but it is a movement that has a lot in common with the actual right.
Well, I think the biggest comparison is just for how authoritarian the left is these days and for how authoritarian the alt-right wants to be.
Exactly.
Because
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you what the one of the other issues is that AC alluded to. I watched a stream I think in December. Do you guys know who Millennial Woes is?
Yep.
Yes, he's alt-right.
Yeah, and you know, I enjoy his stream even though he's kind of a depressing guy, very depressing. But he was interviewing that giraffe dude, Mike Isaacson, who's you know, he's an extreme left Antifa dude, but he's also Jewish. So he asked him all these questions about, you know, being Jewish, and it was clear that Isaacson hates you know, he hated the fact that he's Jewish, and he hates answering questions about it. So
he doesn't know much about the religion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about him, and you know, I think he's a joke in and of himself. So I don't see why he has to be a representative of anybody. So basically, Millennial Woes asked him the question, well, you know, if you're so against the white ethno state, why is it that Israel has the right to be an ethno state too? And Isaacson's like, I don't believe in the state of Israel. What are you talking about? He said he's anti-Zionist. And people immediately, they exploded. They're like, what? This is possible? Because they believe that the left-wing Jews are the Zionists, but it's really not the case. At least it's not the case anymore. Left-wing Zionism has fallen apart.
You know, 100 years ago or whatever. But yeah, that's not the case at all.
So what they'll do is they'll conflate things that have nothing to do with each other. There will be left-wing Zionism is actually anti-religious. It's actually it's been on the decline since probably the 60s and 70s. So it's virtually non-existent in the U.S. anymore. And the people who do hold it are kind of grasping at old institutions like the kibbutzes and crap like that. So it's kind of, they're looking at different mirrors in the funhouse. So when they bring in the Talmud, the left-wing Jews abhor the Talmud. They don't want to learn it. They don't want anything to do with it.
I don't think even the rabbis know about the Talmud.
Which ones? You mean the Reform? Well, yeah, the left wing. If you're talking about actual socialist Zionists, a lot of them are straight up secular. They don't even believe in Reform Judaism. If you go to Israel, I lived there for about 5 years. The Reform and conservative denominations are basically cottage industries. There's probably 3 branches of each. I know the conservative movement has their own what's it called?
Also in the Sephardic world, they don't have separate branches.
Oh yeah, I'm half Sephardic. They have no clue what that's
synagogue.
Yeah, exactly. I'm half Sephardic. They don't have any. I mean, they look at that stuff like it's the biggest joke in the world, because in Sephardic Judaism, you know, stuff like having a female rabbi would be. I mean, they think of it as basically the equivalent of a circus. You know, there is no pretension to all of this postmodern stuff, because you know, in those countries like you know, in our case Iraq, none of that stuff of new Enlightenment religion, you know, the Reformation.
Well, and you were surrounded by Muslims versus, you know, versus like Reform Judaism.
Right, but let's say analytical. Think of it this way:
by Catholics and Lutherans.
Think of it this way: do you think that the whole thing with female clergy is really true to the beliefs of Christianity too? I don't think so. I think it's an innovation of progressivism. So it's
when I was in high school, there were no female pastors. That stuff started in the late 90s. Up until like 95, that didn't happen. And there's still many branches of Christianity that frown on that, just like Orthodox Jews frown on that.
so ultimately, when you're talking about the alt-right, they don't know what they're talking about with the Talmud, or with, if you're talking about progressive Judaism, the Talmud has nothing to do with anything they're talking about.
Right.
Hold on, me and Arjun are chatting here, so I'm still in the live stream. So anyway, but what Adrian was talking about earlier, why is it that so many of them are so insecure, and they're like, oh, we want to be feminist and intersectional and whatever? Well, think about it this way: their entire religion is about not being judgmental of anything. The idea of a sin is kind of passé to them. It's regressive. It's it's not postmodernist enough. So, the Reform Judaism and some forms of mainline Protestantism and parts of the Catholic, some of these Catholic groups, like the Jesuits, by the way, who are very progressive, they're natural vehicles for postmodernism. They believe in things like liberation theology and Catholicism, some of them, or they believe in this tikkun olam, or they believe in I don't know what the equivalent is in some of these like the Presbyterian Church. There's a large Presbyterian church that's very, very progressive nowadays. So it kind of comes naturally because they've done away with the concepts of sin and the concepts of judgment. They're looking towards a more holistic and less doctrinaire view of their own religion. And by the way, that's why they're losing a lot of members. People have absolutely there's no anchor there. There's nothing keeping the faith from being true to it is. I mean, look, I'm not a Christian. I understand what Christianity is. It's the belief that Christ is the savior of humanity, right? Does everybody agree here? I don't think that there's any debate over it. If you're a Muslim, you believe in the Tawheed and the oneness of God in Allah. In Judaism, we believe in that Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe, that the Torah was commanded to us by Moses through by God through Moses. That's a belief system. Take it or leave it. You don't have to agree with it, but you shouldn't just morph it to fit your own standards. That's not what they do. They will deconstruct it and then reconstruct it in their image, and that's why they're able to reconcile all this crap in the Women's March. They're more concerned about fitting in with their progressive friends and being nice and being good to other people. I don't care about being good to other people. I'm fine. Some people in the chat, I don't care if you're part of my religion or not. I'm sure some of you don't have a religion, or you have other religions that I may not agree with, but I believe in those freedoms, and that's the difference between intersectionality and civil liberties. That's my opinion. I mean, what do you guys think about these progressive religions?
Well, first off, I was going to say that from what you were telling me about this problem with the progressive Jews, the left-leaning Jews, it sounds very similar to actually what the problem is in the atheist community, is that postmodernism has taken over. And then, because before it really was like in the atheist community, it was just that you didn't believe in anything. But then it became a movement. Then it became a political ideology, and then it became a group.
Takes everything over.
Exactly, yeah, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So it sounds very similar to this sort of to what's happening right now with the Jews, and it's just that's my big problem with it, is that the fact that right now the argument I have conceded to religion is the moral argument, because as I look around with all the problems in our society, I can't help but feel that it's because we have a very strong moral relativity in our society right now, and I would say that is due to the fact that there is no objective morality that people have to follow. So as we've gotten away and into a more secular society, people are trying to, what they used to turn towards religion, they're turning towards the state, which is why they're voting for a big state. And that's my problem. I'm not against a secular society, but I think we jumped way too fast into it, and then we're dealing with the repercussions right now for that reason, because everybody
the
turns to
left
the
is
state.
pushing it because they want they want a big government.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what actually I think is one of the reasons to co-opt the atheist movement, because I actually consider when it came to communism in Russia, I saw it more as a power grab than anything else, because the Russian Orthodox Church had a lot of power and influence over the people at the time. So the whole point is to get people to look towards something else, as you said, that being the state, and form that big government that you're talking about.
Yes. Yes, I agree. It is a power grab. I saw that recently. Actually, where I saw the quote that the issue is never the issue is the revolution. The person also, like, right after that said, it's a power grab. I believe it was on a video about the red-green axis. It should be called the red-green-blue axis. Do you guys know about that? The red-green axis?
I don't think so, no.
So red for communism and green for Islam. And you can see why I said it should be red, green, blue.
Democrats?
Yeah, blue for Democrats. And basically they're trying to like work together to take over the world. And then I guess they figure after they get rid of us, they're going to fight each other.
I could see it, considering they all want a very similar type of government. I mean, Islam probably wants more of a religious monarchy.
Yeah, they want like
else.
a theocracy, and communism just wants. There's a really good video. It's like a half hour with a woman named Claire Lopez speaking at a tea party. I don't know if it's like a convention or something. She's like speaking in front of people at a platform that it's like South Carolina Tea Party on the platform. And it's a very good video. And if you do a search for red green axis, you'll find the video I'm talking about.
Okay, I'll take a look at that after we're done here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'd be very interesting to me. I would love to check that out, and maybe, who knows, maybe I'll do a little video on it or something. We'll see.
Yes.
Well, before we go, I actually just want to ask you, AC. You were talking in this Discord server about a Candox video, about whether someone was interested in that. Were you talking about a collaboration?
Possibly. I've been doing a lot of research, so what I was thinking is maybe to share my research with others, and maybe they'll make a video. I recently made a video about her, so yeah, I guess I was thinking basically a collaboration.
Okay, well, if you're ever interested, I'm totally down to do that too with you, because absolutely, I think Candace is completely ridiculous, so I would absolutely be happy to do that with you.
That's actually how I found you. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, you saw my response video to the debate, the Blair White versus Candox?
Yeah, I think it was that, unless there was another video. I watched basically every video on her when everyone was making videos. So, if I liked people after I watched their video, I subbed them, and like I subbed you, and then like later on I was like, oh yeah, I was gonna possibly like invite him or something. But at the time I just subbed these people and then like went back later to decide who I liked. Even more.
Fair enough. All right, fair enough. Well, anyway, yeah. If whenever you're interested in doing collaborations, you can just send me a message and we'll work that out.
Yeah, I'll DM you. We can, or maybe I'll make a channel for it.
All right, sounds perfect. Alrighty. Okay. So we've been going for about 2.5 hours. So I was thinking maybe we wanted to end this.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I had another topic I want to bring up, but I can't find the article, so maybe I'll save it for next time.
Maybe we could do another collab another day.
All right, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up, but I'm actually going to do a collab. Do you guys know who Alicia Clegg is?
I do.
So I'm trying to hook up a stream with her, so we'll see.
I was her first collab, and she was my first collab. Yes.
Okay. Maybe you want to tune in or put in your 2 cents.
Yeah, she does a lot of stuff on communism, so that's how I ended up finding her. I found her video on Sansara Taylor, so good stuff.
I actually don't know her, so whenever you put out your video, that'll be the first time I've ever watched anything by her.
Well, if you're in the province of Ontario, it might be a very big problem due to your laws over there, seeing as she's a very big anti-transsexual activist or something.
I'll take the risk.
Okay.
Well, anyway, before we go, I just want to say, AC, I've been loving the videos you've been putting out lately, so keep that up. And
thank you.
And Bold, the work you were doing on Farrakhan was awesome. And I loved your article on Hard News Network. So I really hope that we see a lot more from you.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to spread it as much as possible. I'm on Gab now more often, and trying to spread it. I need that's why I made the hashtag for it. And I think between the videos and the article, there's plenty to read, and people can draw their own conclusions. And again, this is more about the Women's March than about Minister Farrakhan. He's 84 years old. I don't think we need to hope for him to change, but these progressives, they're supposed to stand up for certain principles, and I don't think they are. So thanks for listening, and thanks for all the questions about it.
Well, it's nice to see that we're starting to have some real journalism coming back in, and we're not restricted to this mainstream media crap, because I can barely stand it anymore. Like, even just reading through, looking for articles to talk about on my podcast episodes or anything like that, it's really unbearable. So it's nice to see that there's a breath of fresh air with at least a few different people out there. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you for joining me on the channel today, and we'll collab again soon, eh?
Hey.
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, everybody, have a good night. All right, thank you for joining us on the channel.
All right, good night, folks.